Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today. We're talking about the scary reality of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. There's going to be a lot of discussion about this game for years to come, Square's approach to it, and I'm usually very picky when I do a scary reality video. I talked about The Elder Scrolls 6 specifically because when it was announced, a lot of people thought it was coming very soon, and I provided proof why it was many years down the line. The same could be said for BioShock when it returned through 2K Nevada. A lot of people were pumped, but myself and many others resurrected job listings highlighting monetization, multiplayer, endgame content plans for a series that had no business with that in the past. So now with the embargo lifting on the Final Fantasy VII Remake reviews, mine is already up. It's linked in the description down below. I would appreciate you guys giving that a look. I really grinded it out because I had it on pretty short notice. But what I've done with this video is arranged it in my notes in a 4-point discussion that we're gonna have because there is some misconceptions, misunderstandings, but there's much more underneath the surface that needs to be talked about specifically when it comes to this game. So let's start off with... So the biggest misconception when it comes to the Final Fantasy VII Remake isn't really what the game is. I think most people paid close enough attention to the marketing cycle here to know it is focusing on Midgar, although I think Square would have been smart to just name it Final Fantasy VII Remake Midgar and then just name each entry afterwards based off where the game is set, because calling it Remake 1, 2, 3 is going to be strange. What has been a bigger misconception is the length of the game. A lot of people have talked about how can you make a whole game based off Midgar, but this time that Square allows for the story to breathe and sink into its characters and different aspects that didn't get enough attention in the original, people don't think of. And there's this weird idea out there that I've seen on the internet of folks freaking out about the length of Final Fantasy VII Remake being around the 30 to 35 hour mark, which I thought was way more than I could have personally ever expected. And this is spawned from Final Fantasy VII being a game that a lot of people, I guess, haven't played, which is totally fine, but them assuming that it is this multi-100-hour JRPG that you play for years and years and years and it just never ends. And it's like, no, if you don't have a clue what you're doing when you're playing that game, it's probably 40 hours, all right? And if you do know what you're doing, you can literally slash 10 hours off of that because you know where the good spots are to grind, you know where to go for the quests. There's none of that confusion that is born from these older games that weren't allowed to guide players in subtle ways with environmental details and so on. But there's this confusion that the Final Fantasy VII Remake woefully undercuts the content that is there compared to the original, and I guess in the terms of when you look at the breadth of the entire Final Fantasy VII experience, yes, but then you look at the depth of the remake and it just doesn't compare. And I think it becomes one of those things people just need to experience because you look at things like certain character cutscenes I won't spoil and so on, and yeah, they get some well-needed attention that really brings the game to a new level and it makes Final Fantasy VII better. So here's where it gets personal, and I don't want to project what I'm feeling onto others, but I feel like this emotion should be shared because I'm sure others will feel this sentiment. You see, when it comes to remakes, we can look at Resident Evil, whether it's the remake of 2 or 3. For the most part, 3 aside, I guess, more so 2, they recreate the entire game in good faith and take the right liberations where it's necessary, such as the gunplay and the movement, things that felt ancient. But point being is the entire story is there, right? And when it comes to the Final Fantasy VII Remake, you finish it. I was personally satisfied with the conclusion, but do know the ending is quite different and some people will go into war over that. But knowing there was more kind of left me wanting to play the original. And so I went back and re-downloaded it. And I know you could argue, is that a testament or not to how well the remake succeeded at doing what it had to, right? Because you look at it and say, well, if the remake was successful, you wouldn't have wanted more Final Fantasy VII. But then I look at it and think, well, when was the last time I actually played a Final Fantasy game? I think it's been since 15, and I love Final Fantasy, but it has been a long while. At the same time, though, I think it's mostly the knowledge I have and every other person on the planet who's interested in Final Fantasy VII Remake, knowing that there is more to be told, and we're gamers, we're impatient, right? So I'm like, I'm gonna go get more of that right now. While the story does wrap up properly, just know you may be walking away wanting more because of your knowledge of the original game. Yeah, so this is the part that I don't think a lot of people are going to be very accepting of. Like I said, the ending, quite different, and there are other liberations taken throughout that are different. And I want to speak for everyone, but as someone who adores the Final Fantasy VII story, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there isn't room for improvement or experimentation to help improve it, rather. And I think for the most part, they did a good job, but where they sort of faltered, as stated in my review, was oddly relying on your knowledge of playing the original to help speed up certain aspects of characters' backstories that don't get revealed until later on in Final Fantasy VII, the original. And so if you've never played the original, you're going to be like, wait, what's going on here? But yet a lot of people are playing the remake as their first time into Final Fantasy VII, and Square is well aware of that. So it's kind of confusing in that regard. So the changes for the most part are healthy, but then you've got what is padding in these dungeons that sort of stretches out this experience into something that is 30 hours, maybe to combat those folks who I was talking about in section 1 who were having a real issue with the game length. Whereas if they leaned it down to 25 hours, it wouldn't have mattered how good it was. It was a 25-hour Final Fantasy game, and that just could be unacceptable. And quite frankly, I understand that notion. I know game length doesn't dictate everything, but look at the Final Fantasy series as a whole. I think it would be kind of criminal if a game came out and it wasn't above 30 hours. I think the only one that really sits around there, and I could be wrong, was Type 0 HD when that came out. And I love that game, by the way. It was originally a PSP game, but that wasn't the longest story. Alright, so this is where you have to have your guard up a little bit, and no one's review is getting attacked. Mine isn't perfect, no one's is perfect, but there is absolutely a degree of nostalgia bias, and bias is always something you want to be aware of as a consumer. Of course, we see it a lot with like Nintendo products. PlayStation gets a bump, I'm sure Xbox gets a bump somewhere. I mean, all these companies get their respective bumps, and it does help to know the creator, the person talking, what's their history with this series, and for some folks that's just too deep of a dive when they just want an honest, uncut verdict. But yeah, I saw some 10s, I saw some 9.5s, and I was sitting there thinking to myself, I liked the game a lot. I considered it, you know, mission accomplished. Good job, really liked it, but like 10 as if it's a masterpiece, it's flawless. I mean, there's definitely a lot technically wrong with the game, and when it comes to some of the design decisions, there's absolutely something wrong fundamentally there. As I mentioned, there's padding that's embedded in these dungeons. These absolutely should have been shrunken down. They should not have been intentionally convoluted because it's very clear it's just filler. There's no design purpose for them. They are just there outside of, as I stated in my review, the train graveyard. That one serves a narrative purpose. It builds some characters, and it's a really cool moment in the game with some real atmosphere. And if they did more of that, I wouldn't be sitting here complaining about that. And while for some people, they may not have an issue with the game's dungeons, I think across the board, this will be a pretty significant complaint alongside some of the menial side quests, a lot of the textures not loading in, models just popping up right in front of you. There are a lot of issues in that regard with this game where I just could not fathom ever giving it a 10. And I don't do number scores, you guys know that, because it just brings up too many, like, what does this mean compared to that? But if I were ever to give a number score for the Final Fantasy VII Remake, like, it would be an 8. You know, it was a really great story, the gameplay was awesome, but there were a couple things bogging it down overall. And that's not to say that anyone's wrong for feeling it's above that or below that or anything. It's just, from my perspective, there is some nostalgia bias there. Do be aware that if you are very hyped seeing that 10, I can't really fathom ever applying that score to this game. And I say that as someone who genuinely liked it and said you should buy it. And at the end of the day, that's what matters, right? You know, do you buy it? Do you wait for a sale? That kind of thing, not the number score. So those are the 4 points I just wanted to make in today's video for Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's still a great game. I don't want to spook anyone out from buying it, but I just wanted to clear up A, some misconceptions, and B, just sort of put people on watch for the nostalgia and just be aware of what's happening around you as a consumer, right? That's always something I advocate for on this channel, and I once again want to insist no one's work is being attacked. They're not wrong for thinking it's a 10. It's just I think you can kind of see through it. And so I pass it off to you. I know some of you already have the game. It was available in Australia quite early for you to pick up. One of the weirdest, most staggered launches I've seen in a video game because of these weird, crazy times around us. So if you got to share anything down below, go for it. I will be interacting as always, and I look forward to seeing what you all have to say. So we'll talk there. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below, along with my podcast with my girlfriend, BFGFAFK. Do give that a listen if you're looking to pass the time. It's a good show. And I'll talk with all of you soon. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.